Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to speak to Bill 12, the Fiscal Management Act, which is now in second reading. Now, as I read this bill, one thing really jumped out at me, and that was the complete repeal of the Government Accountability Act. When this act was passed in 1995, the province of Alberta was a leader. We were the first province in the country to adopt a publicly reported, results-based, performance-measured framework into our budgeting process. That act was designed to improve accountability between civil servants, elected officials, the government, and the citizens of Alberta. It was so well regarded by Canadians that all other provinces introduced similar legislation, finally with the federal government following suit in 2006, giving royal assent to the Federal Accountability Act. Mr. Speaker, it's important, I think, to look back at 1995 and really examine what the Government Accountability Act was all about. The Premier of that day, Mr. Klein, made quite an impact on how finances were done. He epitomized the era. Knowing that Mr. Klein not only led the charge on eliminating the deficit by 1995, but also the province's net debt by 1999, it comes as no surprise that he coined the phrase Alberta Advantage. Something else that comes as no surprise, Mr. Speaker, is that this government has done away with not only his vision of a debt-free Alberta, but also in the same breath destroyed the Alberta Advantage too. Now, Mr. Speaker, what's happened with Bill 12 is this government seems to have us in a race to the bottom. Future government budgets need no longer list any of the following requirements from the Government Accountability Act, except in terms of operations. That's total revenues from all sources, total expenses with breakdown, accumulated debt, planned payments, reconciliation of expenses, and revenues for deficit or surplus. In other words, a dramatic shift away from the reporting of performance measures in past budgets. Wow, what a policy shift. When the Government Accountability Act was passed, it was glowingly proclaimed that with the positive impact of reporting publicly on the government performance, that it enhanced transparency, strengthened accountability, provided motivation for civil servants to improve services and programs for Alberta's citizens, and was reported as an immense improvement to our democracy. It would be prudent, I think, to remind the Assembly, Mr. Speaker, that the use of performance measures in government accounting has not always happened. An article written by a political scientist, Kimberly Spears from the University of Alberta and the University of Manitoba, shows insight into the original purpose of initially implementing performance measures into government financial reporting. I quote, "Designed to measure a variety of activities in government, the development and implementation of performance measures was also to monitor a government's performance, and in weak areas of performance to draw attention to where the government should improve. It has also become a way to communicate to the general citizenry about the government's performance at the department and government-wide levels. In a public effort to become more accountable and transparent, the reporting of performance measures is considered to be an educated way for citizens to judge a government's annual performance." Mr. Speaker, I find it quite disturbing, and I'm sure most Albertans will as well, that Bill 12, the Fiscal Management Act, is a step back because it removes many of the performance measures that were required to be reported under the Government Accountability Act. Through its total repeal, it is worth noting over the last few years, well, the last few deficit budgets, performance reporting has become something of a risky endeavour for this government. It's no wonder the PC government wants to repeal the Government Accountability Act. We have watched the challenges of these performance measures for this government lead to a dilemma of legitimacy and authenticity in its reporting. So here we are looking at the 2012-2013 budget, a work of propaganda written for a then upcoming election, and the 2013-2014 budget, where the truth is attempted to be masked and hidden in cloudy and opaque documents. It is something to note that the performance measures are not of themselves beacons of accountability. Simply put, and I quote, "The authenticity of performance measurement is questioned because of the subjectivity of performance itself." The Spears report goes on to outline reasons which I believe are indicative of this government's desire to do away with the Accountability Act under Bill 12. And I quote, "Indeed, the process of measuring performance is a highly subjective task, depending on the stated expectations, the established targets and goals, external variables, and quality of leadership. and a variety of other reasons depending on the assessor's values and biases. The subjectivity of performance is inherent to a political environment, which makes performance reporting a risky endeavour for any government. Indeed, reporting to the public in a political environment is risky given the traditional role of the opposition to critique the party in power and the media to report on the issues that will attract customers, which tend to be those that expose government wrongdoings. Essentially, Mr. Speaker, this boils down to one simple fact. A government that wants people to drink the punch that their performance measures are inherently indicative of accountability is not only wrong, but reasonably can be seen to be manipulative of the public, the media and the opposition parties as well. Performance measures have to be real and substantive. They have to be strong enough to show real results so every Albertan can either rest assured knowing that the government dollars are being spent wisely and with good results, or alternatively, Albertans can be properly and fully informed of the waste or potential for waste. It is not up to the government to dictate to Albertans how they should view the government using ploys such as playing with performance measures in annual reports and business plans. The Government Accountability Act was designed to be a public effort to become more accountable and transparent in its reporting and an educated or intelligent way for citizens to judge their government's annual performance. Something this budget release today now just doesn't do. I want to quote a March 7, 2013 news article from Beacon News, and it quotes the Minister of Finance, and it says the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board admitted that the new budget format made it difficult to compare last year's numbers with this year's. Made all the more difficult by showing a $451 million operating budget deficit that was, in fact, closer to $2 billion after factoring in different costs and cash adjustments. The Government Accountability Act was a communication and management tool. Bill 12, the Fiscal Management Act, is a tool that does nothing more than bring smoke and mirrors back into Alberta politics, Mr. Speaker. At a basic level, the Government Accountability Act put into the provincial budget a quantitative and qualitative measure designed to assess performance against goals. Well, the Health Quality Council report on EMS hit this one on the head. Quoting from page 44 of that report, there is a quote, I quote, a lack of AHS long-term goals and vision. In the future, reporting these kinds of abysmal results won't be required in the province's financial documents. One must wonder if this is only to hide such results from Alberta taxpayers. An example of this loss of transparency is found under Section 7.3 of the Government Accountability Act. The government business plan must include the following: A, the mission, core business, and goals of government. B, the measures used in assessing the performance of the government in achieving its goals. C, the performance targets set by the government for each of its goals. And D, links to the ministry's business plan. That's very clear language about the performance measures required of the government. Section 10.3 in the replacement in Bill 12, it reads, the business plans must be in the form determined by the Treasury Board and must be made public at the same time as the responsible minister makes the fiscal plan public. This language, Mr. Speaker, well, it's about as clear as mud. What if the minister, for one purpose or another, determines that the form for business plans ought to be vague and designed to put a fog over the true affairs of each ministry? Without clear and articulated, measurable, and understood performance expectations, there will never be sustained improvement in government programs and services. Let me leave you with this. Effective decision-making in our democracy requires that Albertans have access to all the information in a reasonable, recognizable, and responsive format. Mr. Speaker, it is never good for democracy when citizens question the authenticity and accuracy of any government document, which inevitably leads to the perception that their government as a whole has failed them.